If you're ending up in Forbes 30 under 30 or on the cover of magazines, that's not conducive to being a good founder. All the value comes from a few hundred genuine, brilliant tinkerers who are there for the love of the game. They're there for the love of the craft. They're there because they're creating something that they want to see exist. I genuinely believe Elon when he says he wants to die on Mars. And so these kinds of people, Ilya Sutskever, the genius behind OpenAI, and Greg Brockman and others, obviously, and Sam Altman, but these are people who have been working at the edge of their knowledge to try to figure out something new for decades. They are not there to be famous. Fame is a byproduct, and honestly, anyone who's on this stage, like me, talking about something like that, you shouldn't trust 100%. We're not the real deal. The real power, the real knowledge, the real wealth, the real creativity derives from a small number of modern, you could call them scientist inventors, the new Thomas Edisons, the Henry Fords, the Nikolai Teslas.
And who are they?
Who are the new ones?
Yeah.
I mean, they're people you've never heard of. They're that geeky kid standing in the corner at the AI hackathon, who's shipping something that you can barely even understand or describe. You can find a lot of them on Twitter, but good luck sorting out the wheat from the chaff. But by the time they're known and they're famous, then maybe like Elon, they still have ambition and they still keep driving, but they're not the true builders underneath.
I don't think you need to have a PhD to be a scientist, okay? If you are naturally curious and you're rigorous and you discover new things, you're a scientist. Like one of my Twitter quips was, the only true test of intelligence is if you get what you want out of life. And that triggers a lot of people. But how else do you know? How else do you know if you're smart? If you're not getting what you want out of life, how smart are you really? Okay, you might have had bad luck once upon a time, but consistently, every time, I doubt it. And there's two parts to that. One is actually testing yourself against the world to see if you get what you want. And the other is wanting the right things in the first place. I wish I was 20 years old and had wings. Not going to happen. So you got to wish for the right things too. Smart people, capable people, don't let themselves be pigeonholed into one definition. That is a disease of credentialism, because we created this university and now you got to go to university and you got to get a degree in something. Then people say, well, what is your expertise? What is your credential? That's a question dumb people ask. Smart people don't ask that. Smart people don't need to know your credentials. They just talk to you for 5 minutes and they figure out if you know what you're talking about or not. And a really good person, a so-called natural philosopher, can be good in any branch of anything. Nature has no boundaries. Nature has no concept of mathematics versus physics versus chemistry. It is all one thing. And to anyone who's either meditated or done psychedelics or read enough books, they've figured that out. It's all one thing. When you find one thing, it connects to the next thing, connects to the next thing, connects to the next thing. And true creativity jumps boundaries. It can go from anywhere to anywhere. It doesn't have to follow a path of interconnections in between. Try the following phrase on. Paul McKellar put this on Twitter a long time back, and I loved it, and I expanded on it. So full credit to him. But he said, I have a great idea for a novel. Does somebody want to write it? I have a great idea for a movie. Does somebody want to make it? I have a great idea for a TV series. Do you want to go do it? I have a great idea for a painting, a great painting. Do you want to go paint it? No, obviously that's not how creative acts work. I have a great idea for a scientific breakthrough. I need some physicists to work on it. It doesn't work like that. You have to create the thing yourself. The thing that is scarce is the entrepreneur. So the people who are saying, I have a great idea for an app or a great idea for a startup, but somebody else should build it and I'll provide the capital and the idea is not the scarcity. Every idea that you can think of has pretty much been thought of before. It's the details in the execution. It's wandering through the maze of potential ideas, figuring out dead end, I built this, that didn't work, turn right, build this, didn't work. That's the hard part. It's wandering through that maze with conviction, with passion, with knowledge. That's the hard thing. So the scarcity is actually entrepreneurs who are obsessed with an idea and a space and have knowledge of it. The scarcity is not in the idea. It's actually not in the capital. Infinite capital will show up for the right person with the right idea. I actually think where you live is the single most important decision you make. But the first part of that is make it a decision. I like to think that even if my parents had not immigrated to the US, I would have probably done so at a later age because I was ambitious. And I wanted to be around smart people and I wanted to build things. When I immigrated to the US, I was not in any position to go to Silicon Valley and build things. I had to kind of, claw my way there. And I got there a little later than I should have, frankly. But at any given time in the world's history, there's usually only one or two places that really matter in terms of moving the world forward. So there was a time when it was Athens in ancient Greece. There's a time when it was Florence in Italy. There's a time when it was London in the United Kingdom. And the time when I was kind of coming into my formative years, it was Silicon Valley. And I knew that. The first time I used an Apple computer, it was an old Macintosh in the computer room in my high school. I just fell in love with it. And I just knew that I had to get closer to Apple. That was the thing that pulled me in. When I got to Silicon Valley, the first thing I did was, with my bags, I went in a taxi straight from the airport to Apple's headquarters, and I wandered around. And I'd read this book by Guy Kawasaki called The Macintosh Way that was very inspirational to me. So at some point, if you have high agency, if you're a person that's self-motivated, which I think almost everybody watching this is, you will end up where you're meant to go. It's just going to take some effort.
Best piece of advice for someone 24 or a new millennial out of college? I would say, just spend more time on making the big decisions. There's basically 3 really big decisions that you make around that age. It's where you live, who you're with, and what you're doing, right? Those are the 3 big decisions. And we spend so much time in relationships. An average relationship probably lasts a couple of years, but we spend very little time deciding which relationship to get into. We spend so much time in a job, but we spend so little time deciding which job to get into. Choosing what city to live in can almost completely determine the trajectory of your life, but we spend so little time trying to figure out what city to live in. So if you're going to live in a city for 10 years, and if you're going to be in a job for 5 years, and if you're going to be in a relationship for a decade, you should be spending 1 to 2 years deciding on these things. These are like highly, highly dominating decisions. So if you're 24, I would say those 3 decisions really matter. And you literally have to free up your time, because the world will assault you with its own agendas, and you have to say no to everything and free up your time so you can solve the important problems. And those 3 are probably the 3 biggest ones.